Chapter 241 finally out. As the seventh prince departed, Michael took a seat in front of Mage Leon's desk, his eyes fixed on the Grand Mage. Master Yuan stood off to the side, his presence unobtrusive yet attentive. Mage Leon leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving Michael's face. "Sir Mike, I apologize for the unpleasantness earlier. I had not expected Captain Ortega to react so strongly to your greeting." Michael's expression remained neutral. "No need to apologize, Grand Mage. I understand that I may have unintentionally caused offense." Mage Leon nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes, well, Captain Ortega can be enthusiastic at times. But I assure you, Sir Mike, that you will not be treated disrespectfully while you are my guest." Michael inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the Grand Mage's words. "Thank you, Grand Mage. I appreciate your hospitality." Hearing this, Mage Leon smiled but quickly set aside the pleasantries. "I'm sure Sir Mike knows why we are here." "Yes, Mage Leon. I still recall our conversation about the soul pool fruit." "Good. I've secured access to one of the kingdom's flying ships, so we can leave anytime. Today was meant to discuss any necessary arrangements." "Are you saying we can depart immediately?" Michael asked. "Yes," Mage Leon replied, slightly surprised by Michael's directness but still answering honestly. "Then can we leave today?" Michael's bluntness was intentional. Though Mage Leon hadn't suggested delaying the journey, he wanted to ensure it didn't drag on any longer than necessary. At Michael's words, Mage Leon smiled. Though the man was a bit too direct, he found it satisfying. He had only been considering the other party's schedule, but if they were just as eager to leave, why waste time? In fact, Mage Leon had never thought of delaying the journey. Their transportation was ready to run at any time today. "Very well, Sir Mike," Mage Leon said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "We shall depart immediately. Master Yuan, please escort Sir Mike to the flying ship while I attend to some last-minute arrangements." Master Yuan nodded, his eyes flicking to Michael before returning to Mage Leon. "As you wish, Grand Mage." Michael stood up, his eyes locked onto Mage Leon's. "I am ready when you are, Grand Mage." Mage Leon smiled, his eyes glinting with approval. "Excellent, Sir Mike. Let us proceed." With that, Michael followed Master Yuan out of the Grand Mage's chambers, leaving Mage Leon to attend to his last-minute arrangements. As they walked, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he was ready for whatever challenges came his way. After a short walk, they arrived at a large open area where a group of kingdom guards were training. Michael's eyes scanned the area, taking in the sight of the guards sparring and practicing their sword techniques. He noticed a figure standing off to the side, watching the training session with a critical eye. As they approached, the figure turned to face them. Michael's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of a tall, imposing individual with a stern expression. The person wore the uniform of a kingdom guard, and a sword hung at their side. Master Yuan took notice of Michael's gaze and took the opportunity to introduce the figure who wasn't far from them. "Ah, Sir Mike," Master Yuan said, his voice firm and respectful. "This is Knight Commander Rin, one of the most skilled warriors in the Kingdom Guard." Knight Commander Rin's eyes narrowed, his gaze sweeping over Michael before returning to Master Yuan. "Master Yuan," he said, his voice deep, "I've been instructed to escort the Grand Mage's companion to the flying ship. I presume this is him." His eyes locked onto Michael's face, his expression unreadable. Master Yuan nodded, his expression neutral. "Yes, Knight Commander. This is Sir Mike, the Grand Mage's chosen companion for the journey to the Dark Forest." Michael caught some key words. Dark Forest. Is this where the soul pool fruit is? He secretly wondered. Knight Commander Ridge's gaze lingered on Michael's face, his expression thoughtful. "I see," he said, his voice measured. In that case, I will ensure that the flying ship is prepared for your departure, Sir Mike. Michael nodded, his eyes locked onto Knight Commander Riz's face. Thank you, Knight Commander, he said, his voice polite. Knight Commander Rigel nodded, his expression remaining stern. It is my duty to ensure your safety, Sir Mike. I will escort you to the flying ship immediately. With that, Knight Commander returned and led Michael and Master Ewan to the flying ship. Along the way he called a nearby knight. Mishal overheard their conversation, as the two didn't hide it that he should go and inform the ones ahead to get ready. As they walked, Michael couldn't help but notice the Knight Commander's stern demeanor. He seemed like a man who took his duties very seriously. After a short walk, they arrived at the flying ship. It was a magnificent vessel, with sleek lines and a sturdy hull. With that, Knight Commander Rigel led Michael and Master Ewan onto the flying ship. On the ship we are already several knights who were operating it. As they prepared for departure, Michael noticed that Mage Lien was nowhere to be seen. He wondered when the Grand Mage would arrive, and how he would get to the ship. Just as Michael was about to start observing his surroundings, a figure appeared on the horizon. It was Mage Lien, flying towards the ship on his staff. Michael's lips twitched as the Grand Mage landed gracefully on the ship's deck. Ah, Sir Mike, Mage Lien said, smiling. I see you are ready to depart. Excellent. Michael nodded, still feeling a bit awestruck. Yes, Mage Lien. Mage Lien chuckled. I am glad to hear that, Sir Mike. Very well, let us depart. As they flew over the kingdom, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. He had never seen the kingdom from this perspective before, and it was breathtaking. The rolling hills and green forest stretched out as far as the eye could see, with the occasional castle or village dotting the landscape. As Michael prepared for his journey with Mage Lien, elsewhere in the land of origin, a girl was finally emerging from the vast desert. Well, about to. This girl was Mira. However, just as she spotted a patch of low green fields ahead, something burst from the sand. Ah, shit. Another sandworm. These monsters had started appearing a few days ago. They weren't high level, and their bodies were soft, but killing them was like dealing with cockroaches, annoyingly persistent and hard to finish off. With limited bombs left, Mira had no choice but to handle them with her bare hands. Fortunately, she had armor covering them now, unlike when she had first started. Mira clenched her gauntlets, the metal shimmering under the harsh desert sun. The sandworm lunged, its massive, segmented body writhing as it shot toward her with its gaping mouth. Mira didn't hesitate. With a sharp exhale, she leaped forward, dodging to the side just as the worm slammed into the ground where she'd stood a second ago. Sand exploded into the air. Damn things never stopped moving. Mira adjusted her stance, feeling the weight of her gauntlets. The sandworm twisted back, rearing up for another strike. But this time, she was ready. Boom! Her fist met the worm's hide with a forceful impact, sending a shockwave through its body. The creature shrieked, thrashing violently, but Mira didn't let up. She pivoted on her heel, driving another punch straight into its side, then another. Each hit sent tremors through the worm's body, breaking its momentum. Finally, with one last, devastating strike, she shattered the creature's soft underbelly. The worm convulsed before collapsing, its body slowly sinking into the sand. Mira exhaled, flexing her fingers. She glanced toward the horizon, where the green fields beckoned. Finally, she muttered, wiping sweat from her forehead. But before she could take another step, the ground trembled beneath her feet. Mia froze. Another worm? No, it was bigger. The sand split apart, and from its depths, a massive shadow loomed. A colossal worm, at least 3 times the size of the one she had just killed, emerged, its mouth filled with rows of gnashing teeth. Mia clenched her fists again. Of course there's a big brother. The sandworm lunged, its gaping mouth lined with jagged teeth. Mira didn't flinch. Instead, she exhaled sharply, shifting into a fighting stance. Mana surged through her body, condensing around her fists as she whispered the name of a skill. Gyron Fist. She stepped forward and met the sandworm's charge head-on. Her fist slammed into its open mouth, shattering its fangs with a sickening crunch. The impact traveled through its body, causing the entire creature to convulse violently. A second later, it exploded from the sheer force, chunks of its body scattering across the desert. Chapter 242 Arrival. Oh, a spirit crystal. By the body of the sandworm, Mira spotted a familiar loot. The conditions for loot drops weren't exactly strict, but they followed a set of rules. For example, killing a human wouldn't grant loot, unless that human had a special bloodline or physique. Why was it different? Perhaps only those who had studied the phenomenon in depth could understand. Neither Mira nor Michael were among those people. One was too busy crafting and acquiring more bombs, while the other was focused on expanding his undead family. However, both loved the sight of loot. That said, Mira had collected far more loot than Michael, despite not suffering as much as he had. Her initial location in the land of origin had been a desolate desert, arguably worse than Michael's. At least he had threats capable of killing him, forcing a change of scenery. But if Mira wanted to leave her barren starting point, her only option was to commit suicide, something even she, with her strong will, couldn't bring herself to do. With no choice, she picked a random direction and began her journey. For days, it was the same endless landscape. She had almost grown numb to it. What was meant to be a realm of adventure had turned into a world of nothingness. More than once, she found herself wondering if she should just end it. The thought was terrifying, but many Awakeners at a certain level started to entertain it. Yet, it was the penalty of death that made Mira hold on. Fortunately, change finally came. She started encountering monsters. They were only one type: sandworms. At first, they were weak enough that she could fight them with her bare hands. That, in turn, earned her a fist-related skill, making her even more enthusiastic about brawling and arming herself. As the monsters grew stronger, so did she. Her experience points skyrocketed, and she found herself loving the desert a bit. Why? Because it made her stronger. What she hadn't expected, however, was to see a stretch of green on a distant desert hill a few hours ago. The sight filled her with excitement. Fighting monsters was great, but just like Michael hungered for civilization, so did she. Besides, the monsters were getting weaker. No, she had simply gotten stronger, and that made them less desirable. Mira placed the spirit crystal in her storage space and made her way to the green expanse with hope this was going to be her first step to civilization. I hope they have things that can explode. On the flying ship, Grand Mage Lian and Michael met once again. They had been flying for a while now, and according to the Grand Mage, they were close to their destination. It didn't take long for Michael to spot it. A vast mountain range stretching endlessly into the horizon. Seeing the barren peaks, his lips twitched. Wasn't the treasure they were after a fruit? Could anything even grow here? The mountains looked practically bald. Okay, maybe that was an exaggeration. There were patches of green here and there. But for something as miraculous as the soul pool fruit, if Mage Lian was telling the truth, Michael felt it shouldn't be growing in such a place. Unless it was as stubborn and resilient as potatoes, he mused. Still, he didn't doubt Mage Lian too much. He was still a novice in the supernatural world, and applying common sense to it wasn't exactly wise. If even stone monsters had intelligence, then what wasn't possible? As the flying ship slowed, hovering just outside the mountain range, Michael's gaze remained locked onto the barren peaks. Mage Lian, noticing his scrutiny, let out a chuckle. I know what you're thinking, Sir Mike. It doesn't look like much, does it? Michael turned to him, raising an eyebrow. Not exactly the most lush place for a fruit to grow. The Grand Mage smiled. Nature's gift. If they weren't weird, they wouldn't be called miraculous. Michael didn't respond immediately. In the end, the only thing that mattered was whether they would actually find it. Then how do we get there? He asked. Majelian turned his gaze to the mountain range. We land here and proceed on foot. Michael narrowed his eyes. Why not fly straight in? Majelian's smile turned sarcastic. Oh, there's no place to land, of course. The mountains are far too treacherous. Michael felt a twinge of embarrassment, realizing he had spoken his thought aloud without thinking. He should have known better. With that, the flying ship began its descent, hovering above a small clearing near the base of the mountain range. Michael followed Majelian and the others as they disembarked, his eyes scanning the barren landscape. Michael took a deep breath. According to Majelian, the reason he hadn't taken the soul pool fruits himself was simple. If he could, he would have. The real issue was the monsters guarding them, creatures stronger than him. Still, they shouldn't be too powerful. Otherwise, attempting to retrieve the fruits would be outright suicide. This could be seen from Majelian managing to return at all if there were two of them. Whatever the case, Michael mentally prepared himself. He turned toward Majelian, who was speaking with the Night Master Yuan had introduced him to, and then later with Yuan himself. One thing Michael had noticed was that, aside from Majelian, he seemed to be the only one truly aware of their real mission. Not that he found it strange. After all, there was nothing unusual about a man keeping his treasure a secret. Michael waited for Majelian to finish his conversation. It didn't take long for Majelian to be down. With that, the group set off towards the mountains, their footsteps echoing off the barren peaks. The two walked in silence for a while, the only sound being the crunch of gravel beneath their feet. Their speed was fast as they blurred, but to the two they walked at a measured pace. After waiting for a while, Michael was about to ask Majelian when they'll reach the treasure location when Majelian suddenly stopped and gestured for him to be silent. Chapter 243 Mountain Apes. Michael's eyes narrowed, his senses on high alert as he scanned their surroundings. Majelian's eyes were fixed on something ahead, his expression intent. Michael followed his gaze, and soon he saw a Jew. A tree, unlike any he had ever seen before. The tree itself wasn't too big, but its branches seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning in impossible ways. And on those branches, Michael saw strange-looking fruits, glowing with a soft, ethereal light. But what caught Michael's attention wasn't the tree or the fruits, but the two massive creatures sleeping at the base of the trunk. They looked like apes, their fur a thick, shaggy coat of brown and gray. They were enormous, easily 3 times Michael's undead blue apes, and their muscles rippled beneath their skin even as they slept. Michael's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the apes. Majelian's voice was barely audible as he spoke. Those are the guardians of the soul pool fruit. We'll need to defeat them to get the fruits. Also, there's no need to worry about damaging the fruit or the tree. Just show an intention to attack, and they will naturally move to another area, Majelian explained. Michael listened carefully as Majelian continued. With Sir Mike's summon, while it may be difficult to defeat a mountain ape, it shouldn't be impossible. Sorry, Mike will take one, and I'll take the other. Please come assist me once you are done. Michael nodded in agreement. Though he couldn't use his detect skill from where he stood, from the aura he sensed from the 2 apes. Though they were indeed more powerful than Majelian, it wasn't to the point of despair. Majelian wasted no time. Raising a hand, he conjured a spear of fire, its tip burning white-hot. Marking his target, with a flick of his wrist, the projectile shot forward, streaking through the air like a comet. The sleeping mountain ape jerked awake the moment the spear struck its thick fur, the force sending embers scattering into the air. It roared, shaking the ground beneath them, its massive frame twisting as it turned its furious gaze toward Mage. Michael, already prepared, reached into his storage space. In an instant, a massive undead griffin emerged in mid-air. The second mountain ape, startled by its companion's roar, snapped awake. Its gaze locked onto Michael and his undead beast. Mage had immediately dashed in another direction, with the first ape making Michael stand out to the second ape without hesitation. It bared its fangs and slammed its fists into the ground, sending a spray of rocks into the air. With an angry bellow, it grabbed a chunk the size of a boulder and hurled it toward him. Michael reacted instantly. "Go," he commanded. The undead griffin let out a screech and charged forward, its wings kicking up a gust of wind. With a powerful leap, it soared toward the incoming rock, smashing through it with sheer momentum before diving straight at the mountain ape. Michael stood behind. He wasn't done. With Mage no longer in sight, Michael summoned both Lucky, his undead wolf, and his undead high human. "Lucky, the environment is too restrictive for you to summon and use your wines, so stick to physical attacks. Also, don't use your poison." The last command was given with the soul pool fruit in mind. He couldn't risk damaging it. Turning to the undead high human, Michael issued another order. "No magic. Your spells are too destructive." Only the undead griffin was granted the freedom to use its vine magic, its vine slash providing aerial support from above. The mountain ape roared as the undead griffin struck, talons raking across its thick fur. The impact forced it back a step, but it quickly regained its footing, snarling in fury. Michael didn't waste time. He barked his commands aloud. "Lucky, flank it. You, keep it occupied from the front." Lucky dashed forward, its undead form moving with unnatural agility. The undead high human followed with steady, heavy steps, its lifeless eyes locked onto the ape. The mountain ape, now fully awake and enraged, pounded its chest before launching itself at the closest enemy, Michael's high human. Its massive fist came down like a hammer, shaking the ground on impact. But the high human was fast. It twisted to the side, avoiding a direct hit, and countered with a powerful punch to the ape's ribs. Though the undead lacked true muscle strength, its sheer durability and unnatural force made up for it. The ape grunted, momentarily stunned. That was all Lucky needed. Leaping in from the side, the undead wolf latched onto the ape's arm, its fangs sinking deep. The beast howled, shaking violently to throw Lucky off, but the wolf held firm. "Griffin, wine slash." Above, the undead griffin let out a piercing screech before unleashing a razor-sharp gust of wind. The attack struck the ape's exposed back, drawing blood for the first time. Michael's eyes gleamed. Good. It can be hurt. But the mountain ape wasn't done. With a furious bellow, it slammed its free arm into Lucky, sending the undead wolf flying. At the same time, it lunged at the high human, using sheer brute force to overpower the undead. The two collided, the impact sending shockwaves through the ground. Michael steadied himself, watching as his undead struggled against the mountain ape's sheer might. The high human, despite its unnatural strength, was slowly being pushed back. The ape's fists rained down like sledgehammers, each strike forcing the undead further into the dirt. "This thing is a brute," Michael thought grimly. "Griffin, more wind slashes." The griffin screeched in acknowledgement, its wings beating furiously as it sent another barrage of razor-sharp wind blades toward the ape's exposed back. The ape roared as fresh cuts appeared across its fur, but it didn't falter. Instead, it grabbed the high human by the shoulders and, with terrifying strength, hurled it across the battlefield. Michael's undead crashed against a jagged rock formation, cracking the stone upon impact. Michael narrowed his eyes. "Lucky, go for the legs." The undead wolf, having recovered from its earlier blow, darted forward with blinding speed. Its fangs sunk into the ape's ankle, twisting violently to unbalance the massive creature. The ape staggered, momentarily distracted. Chapter 244 Victory. Michael seized the opportunity. Griffin, pin it down. The undead griffin dived with a deafening screech, its massive talons latching onto the ape's shoulders, digging deep. The sheer force sent the mountain ape stumbling backward, its balance faltering as Lucky's fangs clamped tighter around its leg. Michael moved swiftly. He raised a hand, dark energy gathering around his fingers. You, return to the fight. The undead mage, though battered, obeyed. It launched itself back into the fray, closing the distance in seconds. This time, Michael gave a new command. Break its arm. The high human wasted no time. With airy precision, it caught the ape's massive wrist mid-swing and twisted violently. Crack! The sound of breaking bone echoed. The mountain ape let out an agonized roar, its arm hanging limply at its side. Michael's expression didn't change. He knew it wasn't over. Even injured, the beast was still incredibly dangerous. But now, its attacks would be slower. Lucky, don't let go. The wolf obeyed, clamping down even harder. The ape tried to shake it off but failed. Lucky's jaw strength was beyond that of a normal beast. Griffin, one more vine slash, straight at its face. A gust of razor-sharp wind tore through the air. The moment it struck, the ape howled, reeling backward, momentarily blinded. Now, Michael's high human moved in for the finishing blow. With both hands raised, it brought its fists down on the ape's skull with all its undead strength. Boom! The impact sent a shockwave through the ground. The mountain ape staggered once, twice, then collapsed. Michael let out a slow breath, watching as the massive beast twitched before falling completely still. Victory! He didn't waste time celebrating. His eyes flickered toward the other fight, Mage Leon's battle. The Grand Mage was locked in combat with the second mountain ape, his flaming spear clashing against the beast's relentless assault. However, he was clearly on the defensive, forced to dodge more than he attacked. Michael analyzed the situation. Mage Leon was strong, but his attacks didn't seem to do enough damage to truly hurt the creature. It seemed like the mountain ape was a creature that needed brute force to take it down effectively. This or a gang up. Without hesitation, Michael barked an order to his undead. Assist him. The griffin launched forward and was followed closely by Lucky. As for the high human, Michael placed it back into his storage space. The undead monsters can be lied about, but a human corpse seemed a bit too sensitive. Mage Leon twisted his body midair, narrowly avoiding the mountain ape's massive fist as it crashed into the ground, sending debris flying. He landed a few feet away, breath steady, flames still crackling at his fingertips. His attacks had landed, but the ape barely seemed phased. Even with its fur scorched, the beast continued its relentless assault, swinging its powerful arms with terrifying force. Michael wasted no time. Griffin, strike from above. Lucky, go for the legs. His summons obeyed instantly. The undead griffin screeched, diving at the mountain ape, its razor-sharp talons slashing at the beast's face. The attack momentarily blinded the creature, forcing it to stagger back. At the same time, Lucky darted in low, its fangs sinking into the ape's ankle. With a powerful twist, it yanked the beast off balance. Mage Leon didn't miss the opportunity. A scorching lance. A spear of searing white-hot fire materialized in his palm. With a flick of his wrist, he hurled it straight at the mountain ape's exposed chest. The lance struck true, piercing through the beast's thick hide. Flames erupted on impact, searing flesh and sending a wave of heat rolling outward. The mountain ape howled in agony. Michael watched intently, calculating. Even with the combined attacks, the beast was still standing. They needed to cripple it. Fast. Griffin. Another wind slash. The griffin obeyed, wings beating furiously as it sent another razor-sharp gust of wind toward the beast's face. The attack struck, slicing into the mountain ape's left eye. The beast roared, clutching its bleeding face, momentarily blinded on one side. That was their chance. The Grand Mage didn't need to be told twice. With a sharp breath, he gathered every ounce of mana he had left. Flames surged around him, brighter than before, licking at the air like a living inferno. He raised both hands. Inferno spear. A massive, burning spear formed above him, radiating intense heat. Unlike the previous lances, this one burned with streaks of gold, the sheer force distorting the air around it. With a single motion, Mage Lian hurled it forward. The blazing weapon shot through the air like a meteor, crashing into the mountain ape's chest. Boom! The impact sent a shockwave through the ground. The flames erupted violently, engulfing the beast in an inferno that burned hotter than anything they had unleashed before. The mountain ape let out one final, agonized roar, before it collapsed. Michael exhaled slowly, watching the beast's massive form go still. Silence followed. Mage Lian wiped the sweat from his brow, his breathing heavy but steady. He glanced at Michael. "I'll admit, that was harder than I expected." Michael nodded. They were tough. But now. His gaze shifted toward the glowing fruits hanging from the tree far away from him. The soulpool fruits were finally within their grasp. However, Michael didn't immediately head toward the soulpool fruit tree. It wasn't that he didn't want to. He simply didn't want to seem indifferent to Mage Lian's current weakness, which he truly was. Fortunately, despite his labored breathing and clear exhaustion from the battle, Mage Lian seemed just as concerned about the fruit. Without hesitation, he started making his way toward the tree. Michael didn't need to be asked to follow. He did so immediately. "What about the monsters?" Michael asked. With Mage Lian's existence, Michael spared little thought for the corpses. The fact that they were too large to fit in his storage space, combined with his lack of contract slots, only made them more undesirable. Chapter 245 Isn't he a burden? Mage Lian glanced at the monster corpses before speaking, his voice calm despite his exhaustion. "The knights who followed us on the flying ship will take care of them. You don't have to worry." Michael gave a small nod, though his gaze remained on the fallen creatures. It was a shame. If he had the space or the contract slots, the corpses could have been valuable assets. Of course, he also needed the required strength to revive them, but at the very least, a larger storage space would have allowed him to keep them. However, this also meant considering how to avoid revealing too much and standing out to Mage Lian. Mage Lian wasn't done speaking. "Your assistance in killing the monsters won't go unrewarded." Michael's eyes flickered with interest. A separate reward. He wouldn't refuse that. In fact, this wasn't the first reward he was owed in the land of origin, at least, in this region. According to his conversation with Mage Lian on the flying ship, the kingdom was still deliberating on what reward to grant him for his assistance against the strange monster attacks in Everlong Forest. However, Michael's focus quickly shifted back to the real prize, the soulpool fruits. Now only a few steps away from the tree, he could feel the energy radiating from the glowing fruits, each one pulsed with an ethereal light. There were 4. Mage Lian was pleasantly surprised. Last time he was here, he had only seen 3. He hadn't realized he had missed one. However, this was good. The distribution was already clear. Mage Lian reached out, plucking 2 of the soulpool fruits from the tree without hesitation. Michael followed suit, his fingers grazing the surface of the remaining fruits before securing them in his grip. Soulpool fruit. Rank: Extraordinary 2 stars. Increases soul energy and strengthens the soul. Can significantly do the same for one's mana capacity. Michael was just about to exclaim, as he held the fruits when he furrowed his brows. The energy within the fruits was diminishing. It wasn't immediate, but it was clear. The glow they emitted was fading ever so slightly. Michael's instinct screamed at him. Michael didn't waste a second. He exchanged a glance with Mage Lian, who had also noticed the change. Without hesitation, the Grand Mage sat down in a meditative pose, cradling the soul pool fruits in his hands. Michael followed suit, lowering himself to the ground while keeping his senses sharp. He gave one final command to his undead. Stand guard. If anything approaches, prioritize my safety. His Griffin and Lucky immediately took position. Taking a deep breath, Michael focused inward, directing his attention to the fruits in his hands. As he closed his eyes, he could feel the energy within them, pulsing faintly, yet undeniably powerful. There was no need for hesitation. He immediately took one. The moment the fruit's essence entered his body, a wave of energy surged through him. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming, a rush of warmth spreading through every fiber of his being. His mana pulsed wildly, his core reacting instantly to the influx of energy. Beside him, Mage Lian was undergoing the same process. Flames flickered faintly around him as he absorbed the fruit's essence, his body resonating with its potent energy. Michael focused, directing the energy toward his mana pool. The soul pool fruit, according to Mage Lian, is said to increase the soul, but it would also massively increase one's mana pool as a side effect. Michael had also confirmed this from his skill. Michael could feel his mana pool expanding. The sound of notifications rang in his mind. The power was intoxicating, but he remained steady, ensuring that every bit of energy was properly absorbed. Minutes passed. Then, slowly, the intensity lessened. The pulsing energy settled within him, his body adapting to the newfound strength. However, Michael didn't wait to observe the changes nor check his new notification and took the second soul pool fruit. The second fruit's energy rushed into him, though this time, it wasn't as overwhelming. His body had already adapted to the first surge, allowing him to absorb the new energy more smoothly. The warmth spread through him once again, but instead of a wild torrent, it flowed like a controlled current, expanding his mana pool. Michael exhaled slowly, focusing on refining the power instead of simply enduring it. His mana capacity stretched further, a noticeable increase compared to before. Beside him, Mage Lian remained silent, his expression unreadable as he absorbed the second fruit's essence. Faint embers flickered around him, but they were more subdued than before. Even a grand mage had limits. Michael could also feel his something within him stabilizing, strengthening with every passing second. The lingering effects of the fruits were still settling, but the immediate rush was over. His grip loosened, and he finally let out a breath. The glow around dimmed as the last traces of energy dissipated from the fruits. Only then did Michael finally glance at his notifications, and he was stunned speechless. Outside the dark mountain ranges, the flying ship stood in place like a silent beast. However, the inside was anything but quiet. At the tip of the ship, Master Yuan stood alongside one of Grand Mage Lian's personal attendants and Knight Commander, the one responsible for overseeing Mage Lian's travels. Though they were far from Michael and Mage Lian's location, their advanced cultivation levels allowed them to subtly sense the mana waves rippling through the air, echoes of the battle against the mountain apes. "Should we go?" Knight Commander Radel couldn't help but ask again. Master Yuan, who stood beside him, didn't respond immediately. His expression flickered with hesitation before firming into resolve. The Grand Mage instructed us to wait for him. Going to his side would mean disobeying his orders and possibly hindering him, Master Yuan said. Knight Commander Rita remained silent for a moment before a certain youth's image surfaced in his mind. What was his name? Sir Mike. What about him? Isn't it dangerous for him to stay close to the Grand Mage right now? Master Yuan was momentarily speechless. Neither of them could have expected that the youth they thought would be a burden was actually the one providing assistance. Chapter 246 Greatest Gain. Your mana has increased significantly. Your mana is overflowing. Your mana is overflowing. Your mana is overflowing. Your constitution has dropped due to your overflowing mana. Your constitution has dropped due to your overflowing mana. Your constitution is slowly weakening due to your overflowing mana. You have gained the skill, Acid Ball. You have gained the skill, Mana Arrow. You have gained the skill, Death Ray. Your soul has been significantly strengthened. Your connection with your soul has been strengthened. Your connection with your undead has been strengthened. Michael's eyes widened at the flood of notifications. The first few messages weren't too surprising. He had already sensed that his mana had increased. What he didn't know was just how much it had improved. However, the next set of notifications made his heart tremble. Is my mana too much for my body to handle? The thought seemed absurd, yet Michael didn't doubt it. He recalled something from his early days as a newly awakened, a post he had read on a supernatural forum. It explained that while Awakeners could distribute their attribute points freely, balance was crucial. For example, an Awakener could prioritize agility above all else, but if their body wasn't strong enough to handle extreme speeds, they would collapse, or, in the worst case, their body might tear apart. Similarly, someone who focused solely on strength without agility would be powerful but sluggish, slower than a snail. These examples weren't meant to discourage customization but served as a warning about reckless stat allocation. Now, Michael was almost certain he had fallen into a similar predicament. Fortunately, it didn't seem severe. He still felt fine, if not better than ever. Still, the notifications showed just how much his mana had increased, and the next few messages confirmed it. I got 3 skills. One had to remember. Every 20 points in intelligence granted a 50% chance of gaining a skill. Gaining 3 meant his intelligence had increased by at least 60 points. Michael's heart pounded in excitement. Normally, reaching this level of growth through attribute points alone would take at least 10 level ups. Then, his gaze shifted to the last set of notifications. Your soul has been significantly strengthened. Your connection with your soul has been strengthened. Your connection with your undead has been strengthened. The soul was a sensitive topic, not just for him but for most Awakeners. For Michael, his soul was the root of his growth, the source of his power. The messages filled him with anticipation. Without hesitation, he called out his status screen, eager to see what had changed. Status. Our name, Michael Norman. Class, Adept Necromancer. A level, 20. EXP, 86,718 by 1,30, 4,551. Our strength, 41.92. Our agility, 62.66. Constitution, 40.22, -3. Our intelligence, 270.0, 120.0. Our attribute points, 20. Skills, Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses, Spearmanship, Acid Shot, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Blind Curse, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion, Acid Ball, New. Mana Arrow, New. Death Ray, New. Talent, Infinite Evolution. A class skill, Contract Slot, 50 by 100. A gift, Mark of Origin. The first thing Michael noticed was the reduction in his constitution. Even his status panel reflected it. It had only dropped by 3 points so far, but if he didn't do something about it, it could get worse. His eyes drifted down to his constitution stat, and the moment he saw the change, his eyes widened in shock. For the first time in a long while, intense emotion flickered across his face. 270. Michael screamed in his head. That was how high his intelligence stat had climbed. The 2 soul pool fruits had directly increased his intelligence by 120 points. Even 10 level ups wouldn't have given him this much growth. No wonder his constitution had been affected. To use an analogy, it was like filling a bucket with more water than it could hold. At least a bucket could overflow, but in Michael's case, his body was a container, and it was sealed. Any more, and it would burst. Michael forced himself to calm down, taking a deep breath before shifting his focus. His contract slots. This was the best way to confirm whether his soul had truly grown stronger. He glanced at the status panel again, and froze. Something wasn't right. Frowning, he shook his head and dismissed the panel. Then, after taking another deep breath, he summoned it again. A class skill. Contract slots, 50 by 100. Michael's heart slammed against his chest. 100 contract slots. 100. His thoughts raced. He did a rough count. Previously, at level 20 he had 50 contract slots. Now, still at level 20 he had 100. Before, he had only gained 2 contract slots per level. Wait. Did this mean the soul pool fruit had increased the quality of his soul so much that his contract slots had jumped to 5 per level? Michael felt dizzy. But at the same time, he was ecstatic. For any other necromancer, this was a good thing. But for Michael, more contract slots didn't just mean growth, it meant raw power. More contract slots meant more undead summons. More summons, undead summons meant more evolution points. It was more everything. As excitement surged through him, his gaze instinctively shifted to his talent. And the moment he saw what was written on top of the list of things he could evolve, his chest tightened. A Michael Norman. Insufficient evolution points. Can't be evolved. Fuck. The appearance of his own name in the talent section meant more to Michael than he could put into words. For days, a single question had been weighing on his mind. Could his talent evolve more than just undead? Could he evolve himself? Until now, he had no answer. But today, that had changed. Anything that appeared in his talent section had always meant one thing. It could be evolved. And now, with his own name listed there, the conclusion was undeniable. Michael could evolve himself. The biggest gain Michael got from consuming the soul pool fruits wasn't his mana pool increasing. This was it. This was his greatest gain. Chapter 247 Red Cauldron. Michael forced himself to calm down. In fact, everything he had seen wasn't even the full extent of his gains. For some reason, he felt it. There was more. Taking a deep breath, he dismissed his panels and sat down, closing his eyes. He didn't know why, but he felt an urge, a strong pull to meditate. The lingering sensation from consuming the soul pool fruits was still there, giving him a feeling as if something within him had been unlocked. Something he might lose access to if he didn't grasp it now, while he was still sensitive to it. As Michael closed his eyes and focused inward, something shifted. It was subtle at first, like a gentle ripple in a still pond, but soon, it became undeniable, a pull, deep and resonant, leading him into the depths of himself. The sensation felt familiar. It was like when he was entering his sea of consciousness. And then, he saw it. His soul. Michael couldn't explain how he knew, but he just did. Darkness surrounded him. No, there was something within the darkness. A glow. A deep, vivid red glow. Something was at its core. Michael drifted toward it, drawn by an instinct he couldn't ignore. As he approached, the source of the glow became clear. A cauldron. A red cauldron. What is this? Michael wondered when, suddenly, his vision shifted. He was still in a dark space, but darkness was no longer the dominant force here. Below him lay a vast, black soul ground. Above him stretched a sky, or at least, it felt like one. Dotted across it were dozens of shining lights, resembling stars. For some reason, Michael immediately knew their exact number. 50. There were 50 stars. What does this mean? Where am I? Panic crept in, but he forced himself to stay calm. That was when he sensed something, an unexpected feedback. It came from the red cauldron he had just seen. It told him it was inside it. However, that wasn't the most shocking part. A fragment of information surfaced in his mind, passed to him by the cauldron. Its name, Primordial Evolution Crucible, and its function. It could evolve anything placed within it. Immediately, Michael made the connection. His talent, infinite evolution. The realization struck like a storm. The cauldron is my talent. Yet, it made sense. Talent was linked to the soul. The cauldron existed within his soul, which also meant the space he had been in earlier was his soul. Michael's thoughts raced. Then, what do the stars represent? Another wave of feedback came. They are your creation and the foundation of your power. The cauldron wasn't very clear. Though it provided information, Michael could tell it wasn't truly alive. Curious, he turned his gaze to one of the largest stars. Immediately, it descended toward him. Given its distance, he had expected it to be enormous, but as it neared, it shrank, becoming no larger than a football. Though surprised, Michael instinctively reached out. The moment his fingers brushed against it, the star shattered into light, taking shape before his eyes. A figure emerged from the glow. Michael's breath caught. It was familiar. His undead high human. Just as he was about to investigate further, a voice called out to him. "Sir Mike, can you hear me?" Mage Leon, casting a conflicted glance at the glowing figure before him, Michael withdrew his focus, returning to the outside world. Not far from Michael stood Mage Leon. The smiling old man hadn't grown any younger, yet something about him felt younger. At the same time, Michael sensed an unfamiliar pressure radiating from him, something threatening. It was the first time he had ever felt such a presence from the old mage. Curious, he cast Detect on him. Lionheart Kingdom Grand Mage? Michael could no longer see his level. Before, it had always been level 29, but now it was surely much higher. Exactly how high, Michael didn't know, but he suspected it was significant. Mage Leon had also consumed the soul pool fruit, just like him. If Michael had gained a massive boost from it, then the old man, a true mage through and through, would have experienced even greater benefits. His posture, his presence, it all exuded newfound power. "Sorry for disturbing your meditation, Sir Mike." Mage Leon remained as polite as ever. "It's fine," Michael replied. "I was just digesting my gains." "Ah, I'm sure Sir Mike must have gained a lot as well." The old man let out a hearty laugh. Though he had no idea just how much Michael had truly gained, Mage Leon could feel it. Michael's Vana was now overflowing, practically leaking into the surroundings. Mage Leon's heart clenched. This mana, it felt even more potent than his own, and the ominous darkness woven into it only made it more intimidating. Shifting his gaze, Mage Leon glanced at Lucky, who stood nearby. It had been his first time witnessing the beast in battle, and though he had seen Michael other undead wolf, this one was different. A terrifying aura had surrounded the beast in combat, something unlike anything he had encountered before. Even now, though that oppressive feeling had faded, a faint trace of it still lingered in his senses. And this wasn't even Michael's only summon. Though Mage Leon hadn't seen the undead high human, he had felt its presence during the battle. None of this changed his attitude toward Michael. He had never intended to be rude. If anything, these realizations only solidified his respect. Besides, he was truly grateful for Michael's assistance. The soul pool fruit had given him even more than he had expected. He owed Michael a lot. I wanted to inform Sir Mike that I'll be leaving first. Rest assured, we won't depart without you. Thank you, Mage Lian. I'll join you soon. As you can see, I haven't fully digested my gains yet, so forgive me for wasting your time. No, no, no. Sir Mike can take all the time he wants. Even I'm just returning to the ship to continue digesting what I've earned. Chapter 248, The Situation. After exchanging a few words, Michael watched Mage Lian fly away. Though he knew the old mage wasn't using flight magic just to show off, sometimes it certainly felt like it. Not that Michael would ever admit to being envious. His gaze shifted to the distant corpses of the mountain apes. Before Mage Lian left, he had briefly considered asking for ownership of one, but he quickly dismissed the thought. Technically, he already had a claim to at least one of them, perhaps even both. But the real issue wasn't ownership. It was usefulness. Reviving one as an undead. That would depend on whether he had the strength to do so. If strength simply meant having enough mana, then Michael had more than enough now. In fact, he was fairly certain he had more than required. But then came the next problem. Where would he even keep the body? It was far too large for his storage space. And undead summoning? Michael decided not to dwell on it too much. No need to ruin his good mood. That didn't mean he had given up on acquiring at least one of the corpses for himself. Though, if only I had a place to store them. The thought lingered in his mind. But for now, it was a matter for another time, along with how he would fill his contract slots again and everything else related to his undead summons. Right now, he had other things to focus on. As for the changes in his soul, he wanted to explore them further, but this wasn't the right place. At the very least, he needed to return to the flying ship, where interruptions were less likely. Just as these thoughts passed through his mind, a notification popped up. Your constitution is slowly weakening due to your overflowing mana. I should fix this. There hadn't been a notification about his constitution actually decreasing again, but this was probably just the first warning. If left unchecked, more would follow, until his condition inevitably worsened. With that in mind, Michael called up his status panel. Status. Our name, Michael Norman. Class, Adept Necromancer. A level, 20. Key XP, 86,718 by 1 lat 30, 4,551. Our strength, 41.92. O agility, 62.66. Constitution, 40.22. O intelligence, 270.0. O attribute points, 20. Skills, undead summoning, undead revival, detect, basic shot, share senses, spearmanship, acid shot, bone spear, slow curse, blind curse, bone armor, corpse explosion, acid ball, mana arrow, death ray. Talent, infinite evolution. A class skill, contract slot, 50 by 100. A gift, mark of origin. To improve his condition immediately, there was only one solution, using his attribute points. Michael was grateful he had saved some. If not, he would have been forced to search for alternate methods. There weren't many things in the world, at least none that Michael could think of, that could raise stats as effectively as attribute points without drawbacks. Without hesitation, he allocated all his available points to Constitution, increasing it by 20. That brought it closer to his agility stat. The effects were immediate. A deep, involuntary groan of relief escaped him as a refreshing sensation spread through his body. Thanks to the side effect of increasing his stats, Michael felt invigorated. There's no notification saying the issue is completely gone, but it should be better now. He eyed his status panel, noting the stark gap between intelligence and his other stats. It was a clear warning. He needed to be more cautious when allocating points to intelligence in the future. For now, balancing his stats seemed like the wiser approach. But with such a large disparity, Achieving that balance wouldn't be easy. Advancing might not even be a good idea in my current state. A headache brewed at the thought. Advancing to the next rank would significantly boost all his existing stats, including intelligence. That meant if he didn't find a way to contain or manage it, his already massive mana pool could spiral out of control. I wonder if evolving myself would change anything. His heart pounded at the thought. The moment he saw his own name listed under the things his talent could evolve, he had already made up his mind. His next evolution target would be himself. There were concerns, of course, but the potential gains far outweighed any risks. The body of a high human might naturally handle large amounts of mana better. His undead high human had a tremendous mana pool. If evolution could grant him a similar physique, then it should be possible for his body to adapt. But another question arose. If his mana pool was already approaching that of his undead high human, what would happen once he evolved? I'll know by tomorrow anyway. His daily evolution points had arrived, bringing his total to 51. Even if he didn't add more undead to his army, he'd have enough points to evolve into a high human tomorrow. Assuming the evolution process for the living worked the same way as it did for his undead. Shaking off the excitement, Michael shifted his focus to his skills. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses, Spearmanship, Acid Shot, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Blind Curse, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion, Acid Ball, Mana Arrow, Death Ray. It certainly looked impressive, even if his class rarely gave him the chance to use most of them. His class made him an unconventional mage, but that didn't stop him from wanting spells he could personally cast, or craving even more. Thanks to the Soul Pool fruits, he had gained 3 new skills. Taking a quick glance at their names, he turned to check their descriptions. Acid Ball, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 4.0%. Acid Ball allows the user to conjure and launch a small sphere of corrosive energy. Current range is 10 meters. A Death Ray, Intermediate Mastery, Proficiency, 2.0%. Death Ray fires a thin, focused beam of necrotic energy that saps vitality from its target. Current range is 50 meters. Mana Arrow, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 3.0%. A staple spell for range casters. Mana Arrow creates a solid projectile of condensed mana that flies toward a target. Current range is 15 meters. Chapter 249 Return. Thanks to his increased intelligence, Michael was fortunate to get 3 new skills: Acid Ball, Death Ray, and Mana Arrow. Acid Ball, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 2.0%. Acid Ball allows the user to conjure and launch a small sphere of corrosive energy. Current range is 10 meters. A Death Ray, Intermediate Mastery, Proficiency, 2.0%. Death Ray fires a thin, focused beam of necrotic energy that saps vitality from its target. Current range is 50 meters. Mana Arrow, Basic Mastery, Proficiency, 2.0%. A staple spell for range casters. Mana Arrow creates a solid projectile of condensed mana that flies toward target. Current range is 15 meters. Michael thought for a bit and went to a clearing. His 2 undead followed him from behind. He wanted to test out his new skills. Taking a deep breath, Michael extended his hand. His mana surged, responding to his will. A magic circle appeared. In front of it, a small swirling sphere of greenish liquid formed. The acid ball wobbled slightly before stabilizing, a testament to his basic mastery level. Michael controlled the power and narrowed his eyes at a nearby tree. A raw sight in this mountainous range. The sphere shot out, covering the 10-meter distance in an instant before splattering against the bark with a faint hiss. The effect was immediate. The bark sizzled, darkening as the acid ate away at it, leaving behind a bubbling, corroded scar. Michael stepped closer, examining the damage. The damage seemed like what acid shot his other skill would do, but there was a difference. The difference was in application. One shot out like it came from a hose, and the other worked like a true projectile. Nodding to himself, he stepped back and raised his hand again, this time focusing on his mana arrow. Another magic circle appeared as pure mana condensed into a sleek, glowing projectile. Michael took a moment to steady his aim while also controlling the power to the minimum before releasing it. With a sharp hum, the arrow flew through the air, cutting a clean path toward its target. The impact was sharp and decisive, opening a huge hole in the tree and dividing it in two. Michael smirked. Acid ball weakened defenses, and mana arrow delivered a precise, penetrating blow. The combination had potential. More than anything, Michael was happy he now had more means of attack. Michael stood in the clearing, contemplating whether to use Death Ray. While Acid Ball and Mana Arrow had already shown their usefulness, he had yet to test the Necrotic Beam. The skill seemed like it would work better on a living target. As he considered his new skills, his heightened senses picked up movement in the distance. Commander Rid and Master Yuan had at some point appeared, and they approached with a group of knights. Michael turned to face them, his undead standing silently behind him like airy sentinels. Rachel and Yuan stopped a few paces away, their gazes assessing him before Rachel spoke. "Sir Mike, we are here to transport the bodies of the two mountain apes on the command of the Grand Mage. The flying ship is prepared to receive them." Michael gave a slight nod. He had expected something like this, as Mage Lian had already hinted at this to him. According to the other party's tone, it was as if it was beneath them to collect the loots of a battle. Something Michael didn't think he would be able to relate to. The corpses of the beasts were valuable, whether for research, resources, or something else entirely. "Understood," he replied. "Do you need assistance?" Michael turned to his undead griffin and felt it could probably carry something as heavy as the mountain ape. Master Yuan responded politely, as always. "No need. The knights will handle the heavy lifting." Michael nodded and didn't force it. He thought for a moment and decided to head back to the flying ship. "Okay then, I'll be going." He waved to Master Yuan and Commander Ray before jumping onto his undead griffin, dismissing Lucky to the netherworld, a sight that shocked everyone present. What Michael didn't know was that just as he had envied Mage Lian's ability to fly, his current action had caused others to feel the same, and more, towards him. Michael landed a short distance away from the flying ship, the wind from his undead griffin's wings scattering dust and leaves across the ground. Once his feet touched solid ground, he reached out and stored the griffin in his storage space. As he approached the ship, the remaining knights standing guard took notice of his arrival. A few of them exchanged glances. One of the knights stepped forward and gave a slight bow. "Sir Mike, welcome back. I will guide you to your quarters." Michael simply nodded, following the knight as they ascended the ramp leading into the massive flying vessel. The hum of magical energy resonated through the ship's structure, and the interior corridors were sleek yet sturdy. The knight led him through a series of hallways before stopping in front of a door. "If you need anything, sir, just ask." Michael nodded and stepped inside, taking in the simple yet well-furnished space. A bed, a small table, and a storage chest. With a final glance at the knight, he closed the door behind him, finally allowing himself a moment to rest. Of course, Michael didn't just drift off to sleep. He lay down on the bed and closed his eyes, but it wasn't because he was resting. Instead, his consciousness was in his soul. It sounded strange, but that was exactly what was happening. Michael could still feel the heightened sensitivity of his soul, a lingering effect of the treasures he had consumed. However, he could tell that even when the effect fades, he'd still be able to access his soul freely. Right now, he stood within his soul, staring at the red cauldron, his talent. As he observed it, countless thoughts raced through his mind. Chapter 250 Discovery. Michael wasn't particularly familiar with cauldrons. One couldn't blame him. Even in Aurora, they were considered ancient tool of the past. Fortunately, he had seen them enough times before to recognize one. The red cauldron in his soul stood on 4 legs and had no handles. However, its legs were positioned oddly, rather than being evenly spaced or symmetrically arranged. Each one seemed to point in a different direction, as if they had chosen north, south, east, and west for themselves. Despite its strange design, what drew Michael's attention the most were the intricate patterns carved into its surface. They were familiar. At first glance, they looked small, but at the same time, they seemed large enough to be clearly visible. Michael focused on the 2 largest patterns, one depicting a human, the other a wolf. The wolf figure gave him a strong sense of familiarity. Is this lucky? And this human? His gaze flickered across the patterns. Are all these engravings representations of my undead? His mind drifted back to his earlier experience inside the cauldron. What had caught his attention the most back then were the stars in the sky. Inside, there had been 2 bright stars. He had chosen one, and it had revealed the figure of his undead high human. Now, on the outside of the cauldron, there were 2 distinct patterns. 2 bright stars. 2 distinct patterns. Lucky and the undead high human. Michael wasn't entirely sure, but something told him his suspicion was right. But why? Why were these 2 being highlighted? Why did these patterns and stars seem directly related to his undead? He had no answer for the latter question, but as for the former, he had a theory. Potential. That was the most likely reason. Both Lucky and the undead high human were the strongest beings in his army, creatures he considered comparable to extraordinary monsters. Well, one clearly was. Not only were they the highest-ranked undead under his command, but they were also the only ones at extraordinary rank. It made sense. However, that was all it was. Just a theory. The red cauldron gave him no feedback. It seemed that any further discoveries would have to come from his own efforts. Let me check inside. The moment Michael thought of the inner space of the cauldron, his vision shifted. He was back. A black ground. A starry sky. Michael's eyes swept across the sky-like expanse within the cauldron's inner space. The darkness stretched endlessly, dotted with faint glimmers of light, each star twinkling softly as though alive. 50. He counted them. 50 stars in total, each varying in brightness. Yet, despite their numbers, 2 stood out the most, radiating an intensity that dwarfed the rest. They were unmistakable, glowing with an almost tangible presence. Michael extended his will, summoning the 2 brightest stars. The response was instant. The stars pulsed, their radiance expanding until they burst forth as beams of light, cascading down and condensing into 2 distinct figures before him. A human and a wolf. Michael's gaze locked onto the familiar forms. So it really was lucky, Michael murmured to himself. The realization solidified his earlier thoughts. The patterns on the cauldron, the stars within the inner space, everything pointed to these 2 as the most exceptional beings in his undead army. But what did that mean? Was it simply an indication of their strength? Or was there something more to it? Michael reached out, his fingers brushing against the light-formed figures. His hand passed through them without resistance. The figures of Lucky and the undead high human were nothing more than light. Intangible, insubstantial. No matter how he moved his fingers through their forms, they simply wavered like ripples in water before reforming. Michael frowned. He thought for a moment, staring at the glowing figures. If these stars, these light forms, were meant to represent his undead, what exactly could he do with them? His mind spun through possibilities. Michael focused his will on the figures. The moment he did, a strange sensation coursed through him. The light figures flickered, their radiance pulsing as though responding to his intent. Then something clicked. Michael's vision shifted. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable at first, but the longer he focused, the clearer it became. He could see inside them their organs. For the high human, Michael could even see the remnants of its previous acupoint in its head. What is this? The discovery was astonishing, and Michael couldn't help but experiment with it for a while. He observed, analyzed, and played around with the details he could now perceive. If only they weren't just representations of light. It was merely a passing thought. Yet, the moment it formed in his mind, a shift occurred. Both Lucky and the high human trembled slightly before their forms began to change. The once ethereal light figures solidified, their glowing outlines fading away as they transformed into the real, physical versions of themselves. Moments later, Michael's eyes opened in the outside world. All 50 stars are indeed my undead. At this point, he could no longer deny the possibility that the red cauldron was a representation of his talent. But this realization brought even more questions. Was it the same for other Awakeners with talents? Without the help of a treasure like the soul-proof fruit, would they eventually gain access to their soul? If so, when? Or was it possible to access one's soul at any time through specific methods? Were there advantages and disadvantages to having access to one's soul? A flood of thoughts filled Michael's mind. But one question lingered above all others. The red cauldron. Do talents truly have a physical or conceptual representation? He had no answer. Another thought followed closely behind. Was the existence of the red cauldron a result of his transmigration to this world? Just as Michael was getting lost in his thoughts, a knock echoed at his door. Michael temporarily pushed everything aside. Thinking about it now wouldn't bring any answers. He turned toward the door. "Who's there?"